Hello and welcome to Bomb Squad Matinee. I'm your host, Ethan Hawker, and with me I have one regular.
Hi, I'm goth anime legs Uncle Daisuke Jigen.
God, Jesus. And today we are joined for the second time by returning special guest.
Hi, I'm Space Queen Emily.
And today we will be revisiting director Hayao Miyazaki with his very first animated feature film, Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro. Before we dive in, I'd like to give just a minute to Emily to sort of introduce and plug herself. She's a big fan of both Lupin and Arsène Lupin, the original novel character, or short stories and novels, I believe. I'm not the aficionado, so I'll let her speak.
I'm Space Queen Emily. I'm a big Lupin III freak. I've seen literally every anime there is to see. I've seen the live action stuff, the obscure live action stuff, the Takarazuka review stage thing. Almost everything I would say. Unless it's like super obscure, like I don't know, animated commercials or something. I've seen it. So I wouldn't call myself an expert, but a very avid fan. And I've read at least like 3 of the Arsène Lupin books. They're all right. I don't know. I don't have big opinions on them, but they're all right.
Yeah, I feel like I remember you speaking especially sort of negatively of Lupin versus Herlock Sholmes, isn't it?
Yeah, that one's weird. They make Holmes kind of a Sholmes, a big old dummy in that one. He's kind of a think first, or a fire gun first, ask questions later kind of a guy in that one. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, the character of Arsène Lupin himself is pretty alright, pretty fun. The novels just seem... I don't know if it's a translation thing or something, but they seem especially stream of conscious.
Yeah, that might be it. I don't know. I'm sure the audience can learn more about that when we inevitably discuss the Lupin versus Sherlock Holmes OVA that is completely unrelated to the Lupin III franchise. Which we'll definitely be doing, we promise, as soon as we cover the Les Miserables anime that kind of stinks. But it's really exciting to have you back as we discuss Lupin's third feature outing, second animated feature outing, and overall one of his most exceptional sort of works. Well, I don't know. He didn't make it. One of the most exceptional works in the Lupin canon, I suppose, broadly. But before we discuss this film in particular, I'd like to throw this to both of you, your history with Lupin. Tim, if you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, so for me, Lupin was actually kind of a blind spot for me for a while. Like, I was aware of Lupin III, mostly because I knew that, like, I think it was the first 50 episodes of Part 2 aired on Adult Swim. But, like, that was one of their first anime lineups, so that was before I even heard of Adult Swim. I didn't have cable growing up, so a lot of my knowledge of Adult Swim prior to 2007 was just sort of hearing from a friend about a thing. So I didn't watch it when it aired on Adult Swim, but this was actually the first Lupin thing I watched was Castle of Cagliostro, because I was aware that this was the directorial debut of Hayao Miyazaki. So I was interested on that level, and also on the level of, Lupin was just a thing that I was curious about. And I thought it was quite fun first time I watched it, but didn't really get much further into Lupin until a few years later, when Toonami would start airing Part 4. And I was like, I figured this is a good excuse to get into parts 1 through 3. And fortunately, they had all of it on Crunchyroll at the time. So watched through Part 1. I watched what was dubbed of Part 2 at the time. And then, the rest of Part 2 just in subs, and Part 3. And I have also I've seen, I think it's 5 parts now. Is that where we're at?
6.
6?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I've seen part 6 yet, but
That's all right.
I've seen at least 5 of them, and it's always a reliable, fun time. And also a big fan of The Woman Called Fujiko Mine. I thought that was a really good series. And as far as movies go, I haven't seen a lot of the movies. Like, I have seen Lupin III the First, which I quite liked. Directed, of course, by Godzilla -1 director Takashi Yamazaki, who the three of us talked about that movie before on our Godzilla -1 episode. Go check that out. Yeah, also great movie. And I did watch Jigen's Gravestone and Goemon's Blood Spray, because, again, I was a big fan of The Woman Called Fujiko Mine. Still haven't seen Fujiko's Lie. I might watch that at some point. But, yeah, the Lupin movies I definitely need to get more into. Especially, I hear a lot of good things about Mystery of Mamo. That one I'm very curious about. But yeah, that's... my history on the franchise, more or less. One quick thing before I hand it off, though, is I got things about two of the voices of Lupin. Number one, the original Japanese voice, Yasuo Yamada. Just a fun fact, he was also the Japanese voice of Kermit the Frog. So right here, I'm gonna play a quick snippet of the Japanese version of Rainbow Connection, just because I think it's delightful.
いつの日かその秘密を僕は見つけようラララリララルラララララリラル
And the second thing is Tony Oliver, who is the primary English voice of Lupin. I have gotten to meet him twice. The more recent time was Holiday Matsuri 2022. He was doing a panel on like the history of Power Rangers, because he was one of the producers at Saban when it was first coming out. But the first time I got to get his autograph. I wanted to get something Lupin signed, but I didn't have any DVDs yet at the time, so I just bought a card that he had at his booth. So got my autograph on that card there.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, quite like it. And then I also got an autograph for Ethan. He gave me his Blu-ray of Sea Prince and the Fire Child to get signed by him. And when I handed him that DVD, his exact word was, "Wow!" It was so good. He was so excited about that. Because he's just like, man, that was the first thing I worked on. That's incredible. So yeah, Tony Oliver, cool guy. Lupin, pretty cool guy. We're gonna talk more about his adventures. He is a nice man. Many such cases. But we're gonna talk more about his adventures later, and I'm gonna pass it back off to you.
Yeah, a lot there. The dub stuff, it is always interesting. Tony Oliver especially. It is kind of weird that there's no dub track for this one specifically with Tony Oliver. I think just because I think of Mamo having a gazillion different dubs. I would like a version of Tony Oliver, of Cagliostro with Tony Oliver. I don't think it would be especially good. I don't know how well he would fit into it. But I want it just for consistency's sake as much as anything, and just to hear him take a crack at it, because I do feel like he's so good at the scheming Lupin. But like part one, like the Miyazaki and Takahata years, proves that maybe he could do it. I don't know. Your mileage may vary on that one, but yeah, I think it's also worth noting that this isn't Miyazaki's first rodeo with Lupin. He'd previously worked on the post episode 6, though I think like episode 10 and 11 was when he started to become just all his work for Lupin III Part 1, so around half. Or him and Isao Takahata, of course. So he was pretty familiar with the character walking into Cagliostro, which is worth noting. Very interesting. Also, one last thing I guess about Tony Oliver is I'm very glad that he got so excited about Sea Prince and the Fire Child. It's incredible because he sounds exactly the same. He like from his first role, he has not changed at all.
I I watched it while I had borrowed it from you because I'd never heard of it before, and I was like, oh yeah, that just sure is him, right there.
Yeah, he just understood immediately that is the voice I'm going to do, and has not really deviated from it. It's always weird when he really acts, and I don't mean that in like a derogatory way, but when he tries to do a funny voice, it is fascinating because he can kind of throw it. He plays one of the brothers in Gurren Lagann, the Jorgen and or Belinbo, and he does a decent job of that. I never knew he was one of them, but
yeah, like I didn't realize until I was like in line for him that he was also the voice of like Naruto's dad and Ulquiorra from Bleach.
I think you mean Boruto's grandpa.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah, that was what everybody was in line for, was like the weeby stuff, and I was like, I just want Lupin.
Yeah, Lupin. But yeah, no, I'm excited to talk about the film proper as well. But Emily, your history of Lupin.
Yeah, honestly, my story's a lot like Tim's. Cagliostro was my first Lupin. I had been sort of on a Miyazaki kick. And as I was looking through his filmography, this one stood out as being, pre Ghibli, and I was like, well, that sounds interesting to watch. I should do that. And at the time, I was watching all of them with whatever the Buena Vista Disney kind of dubs were, but there wasn't one of those for this. But there was 2 dubs, so I was like, oh, what do I choose? So I saw David Hayter played Lupin in the anime's dub, and I'm like, well, I'm not terribly knowledgeable about Metal Gear, but I think Snake is cool. I know what Snake sounds like. I like David Hayter. I like War in the Pocket, and he plays Bernie in that, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to watch that one. So I watched the anime's dub of Castle of Cagliostro, and I thought, wow, that's pretty good. And I kind of just was like, I want to watch more of this. So I didn't know what to do from there. But there was this great article that ANN published back in the day by Lupin expert Reed Nelson, Lupin III, Where to Start and What's Worth Watching, published in 2 parts. One of them covers like the TV show notable episodes, and the other kind of breaks down the movies and OVAs and TV specials and that kind of thing. And so I just kind of went from there and was like, well, that one sounds good. That one sounds fun. I'll try this. So I gave a couple of those a go, and then eventually the Japanese version of Part 4 started airing, and Crunchyroll got that. So I watched a couple episodes of that. Didn't exactly finish it, but did really like what I saw. And then I just sort of fell into the Part 2 rabbit hole, the Red Jacket Tony Oliver dub. Watched a lot of that. I'd actually seen, like, the first Lupin thing I think I ever saw was one of the random episodes of that as a kid on Adult Swim, where I'm going, I'm probably too young to be watching this. However, specifically, it was the one with Fujiko's weird aunt Bujiko Mini. I remember this for some reason, which of course turns out to be Fujiko in a fat suit all along. But yeah, I sort of fell into the Part 2 rabbit hole, and then eventually I was like, you know what? I should probably, like, I don't know, deep dive into the whole thing. So I decided to just start all over from Part 1 all the way through in production order. And that's sort of where I did until I finished it. I just finished the Daisuke Jigen spinoff on Amazon of the live action 2014 film. I watched that maybe a month or 2 ago, and that's got me all caught up.
Deeply deranged. I've seen some of those specials. They made me watch that Stinky Baby special with the what is it, Full Metal Alchemist character designer on that one? Or is that the
No,
other?
but I can see why you would think that.
No. But stinky bad. Some of those are truly dreadful.
They're quite bad. Some of them not in a fun way. Some of them in a fun way. But a lot of them are aggressively mid.
Yeah, they're aggressively mid. Oh, yeah, some of them I guess are like, I don't know, that Stinky Baby one was kind of bad in a way that I felt offended, I guess, which is something. It made me feel something, as opposed to, like, I don't know, Napoleon's Dictionary, which is nothing. It just looks bad and stakes. Easily the worst Ezuki thing by like a country mile, I would say. But my own thoughts on, or my own history rather, with Lupin, but pretty brief actually. I probably have the least amount of experience here overall. Is I've watched a decent chunk of Part 2 dubbed. Part 1 I've revisited several times, but otherwise it's mostly just the specials in the films. my first encounter with Lupin was, like with everyone else here, Cagliostro, Anime's dub, second verse, same as the first, which isn't too uncommon, but it is, I think, it's somewhat contested as a good entry point, but I would say it is. I think there's enough like Cagliostro in the larger Lupin canon that you can kind of acclimate to some of the zanier stuff or the weirder stuff. I guess that's part of the nice thing about Lupin, is there's a Lupin for all seasons. Eventually I will watch part 3, because that's what I'm especially interested in.
It's good.
Think so. I like that he goes from like cleft chin, handsome Lupin to just being extremely deranged looking, which is appealing to me.
It's fun watching the designs for that one, like just really just kind of like melt on purpose over time, just get really exaggerated.
Yeah, someone who especially likes Momo and Bye Bye Lady Liberty. That's really appealing to me, is when they get real loosey goosey with them. Not that Cagliostro is bad by any means, but I think it's just two sides of the coin of the goat bill, rather. Wow, that was good. But otherwise, I don't have a mountain of experience. That and the specials. I really like the first Jesugi special, Bye Bye Lady Liberty, and the rest are sort of diminishing returns, continuously. And some of the other specials I have a fondness for. I have a real fondness for Fuma Conspiracy, which is sort of the spiritual successor to this film. And I would like to get reissued on Blu-ray in the States sometime, please, so it doesn't cost a $1 gazillion again.
I would like an HD version of that period, please. Thank you.
Yeah. High def Fuma Conspiracy, much wanted. But we're not here to talk about Lupin III, the Fuma Conspiracy. We are here to talk about a much worse film, Lupin III, Castle of Cagliostro. Not actually, to be clear. We're here to talk about Lupin III, Castle of Cagliostro.
So much for an early retirement.
And we're going to just lead in with the usual overall thoughts on the film going in. Emily, if you'd like to take this one.
Yeah, I like this film a whole lot, honestly. There was an interview where Miyazaki said he wanted to make it simple enough that like a grandpa from the sticks could just understand it completely. So he wanted to jettison all the traditional like kind of Lupin stuff in favor of mass market appeal, and the correct move of all time. He did it. It's simple. It's easy to parse. You could show this to your grandma and she'd probably be able to remember what happens in it a week later. I think that's a sign of a pretty enjoyable, pretty mainstream, wide appeal film. And I think it worked, because clearly a lot of the franchise afterwards sort of is trapped in the shadow of Cagliostro. They either all try to be their own thing, or they try to be a worse version of Cagliostro. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, But yeah, I mean, going in, I don't know, I'd seen it so many times before, I can't remember what I first thought of the film, but I guess I just thought, fun looking monkey man thief has an adventure, and I got that. I certainly got that. He's an interesting guy, Lupin. He's a nice man. But yeah,
Smiles.
he gets mad sometimes. Bang bang, Walter. What a great song. But yeah, it's a lot more in line with what you would think of as your sort of typical Miyazaki flair than what you think of in a Lupin kind of thing. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting meld of the styles, especially considering his work on his Takahata's work in part 1 isn't quite as Miyazaki flavored as this one is. It really just coalesces into what exactly what you'd think of, right down to the anime food that looks so good. I mean, yeah, it's got a lot going on for it. It's endlessly referenced. Clarice became this prototypical moe figure, I guess, which has been discussed to death, but with good reason. But yeah, I mean, it's a good film. I was certainly looking forward to watching it again. It's been a long time since I had watched it in Japanese or watched it with the streamlined dub, so it was fun getting to see the differences, because at this point I'm just so used to the anime's dub, anything else feels slightly wrong. I had a good time with it.
Yeah, that it's so weird going from the usual sort of Genion kind of crew that I associate with, who they've done it for a bunch of other companies since, just because they are sort of codified as the voices, going back to the anime's dub or the streamlined dub, which are very different kind of takes on Lupin. And I mean, the whole gang, really. It is so weird. I feel like we'll get into it, obviously, when we discuss the dub. But both voices for Jigen are a bit strange to me in both of these. But they also still work. I really like both of the dubs on this one. It's nice. It's nice having two cakes. That owns.
Two gigantic meatballs in your Lupin spaghetti.
Yeah, exactly. I presume that's partially what you mean by the anime food that looks so good. Is just extremely
that's the one.
Good-looking spaghetti. All the food that Lupin crams into his mouth hole when he's trying to feel better. Very good. There's just a lot of good food stuff going on here. It is interesting. 1979 was just a really good year for anime, like films especially, because like in terms of like if you like Toei movies, like old Toei films, it's like you've got Cagliostro, which is very much in that tradition with like a dash of world masterpiece theater kind of in the mix. Taro the Dragon Boy, also 1979 with Yasuo Otsuka working on it as well, and the Galaxy Express 39, which is a different beast from both of them, but also tremendous. One of the best to ever do it. So you were spoiled for choice when this came out. It's also interesting when you mentioned the Part 1 flavor, because it does feel different. Like there's a little bit of, I feel like Episode 10, Hunt Down the Counterfeiter, is usually considered like a proto-Cagliostro, and I always see a little bit of Episode 21, Rescue the Stubborn Tomboy, which great episode title. Really, really tremendous. I see a little bit of both of those in this one, but like not much. They do feel a bit. I think Rescue of the Stubborn Tomboy I actually see a lot more of in this than the Counterfeiter one, which is a bit more hard-edged. It's sort of like everyone kind of dies at the end, except for Lupin, kind of thing. But it does have counterfeiting in it as a major plot point, so everyone kind of gravitates towards that one, I think, on some level. Not that it's a bad episode, just that it's a little different from what you get here. And that's why that show is good. People who haven't seen Part 1 absolutely should, though I feel like fewer and fewer people are having that problem now that it's pretty widely accessible, which is a good thing. That's great. Dim, overall thoughts on the film?
Yeah, first off, I need to say something that's going to hurt both of you and everybody watching. So me and my fiance used to do a weekly trivia thing at a local bar and grill, and I think the question was something about Spirited Away, and they were like, this movie came from director Hayao Miyazaki, and we all just like screamed, fuck you. We were so upset about it. It ruined our night. And I've ruined all of your nights now. But I'm going to make it up for it by talking about this good movie, Castle of Cagliostro. This is a good time. I like it a lot. I mentioned before, like all of us, this was my introduction to Lupin as a concept, and like I think it's a pretty solid starting point, honestly. Like you start off with this heist of them just running out of the building, doing their leaps. Getting into their janky little car with their big bags of money. So you kind of already get like Lupin and Jigen's deal just from that scene alone, and then you got some stuff with Fujiko and Zenigata. You kind of get their deal. I kind of wish there was a little more Goemon, but I'm just a Goemon boy. Just want more of my samurai boy. But yeah, it's a fun time. Good starting point kind of movie. There's a lot of fun set pieces. We have that sort of chase scene pretty early on, which fun fact about that. So this movie and Mystery of Mamo were heavily edited and repurposed into a video game called Cliffhanger from the 80s. And I used to listen to the Toonami Pre-Flight podcast, and at one point, I think they were talking about this movie, and Jason DeMarco mentioned that like he had played this game before the movie proper came to America, and then when he was watching the movie, he was like, I know this. I know this chase. which is just always stuck in my mind. I just love that little tidbit. Yeah, that chase is a fun scene. I love the stuff in the clock tower where they're kind of like playing around in the gears. Guy gets squished. And then they have the little sword fight where you have to wait for the turn and then just a lot of fun stuff there. I love that the Count's death is like such a like classic cartoon villain death. Like he goes to get his treasure, and then he finds himself between two clock hands that are coming together, and then he just gets squished. It's classic cartoon shenanigans. This movie is very, very much a classic cartoony fun time, and good Lupin fun time too. So I'm glad I got to revisit it. I watched it twice somewhat recently. I watched the local Alamo Draft House played it subbed, I think, last month, and so I finally got to see it on a big screen with a crowd, and that was fun. Like I always love seeing like Miyazaki stuff in general, or Ghibli stuff in general, on a big screen and get the full effect of it. And then also it was a good crowd for it too. Like everybody laughed when they were supposed to laugh, and it was just a fun time. And then I watched it literally right before this recording to refresh myself a little bit, and it's just a fun time every time. So I'm glad I got to revisit this one for the pod. Back to you, Ethan.
Absolutely, yeah. This is one where I was able to see it in theaters a while back, 2017, I want to say, with the a streamlined dub of all things, which was a very pleasant surprise for me personally, though I imagine more than a few people were disappointed by that. I love that streamlined dub, but we're going to get into that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is really getting into it, I guess, just immediately. This is a really incredible movie. I know at one point the plot was going to be it was basically going to be like a long episode of the show. It was going to be about like stealing a drill tank to steal some sort of treasure. And originally, Yasuo, this is a really consistent thing that happens in Lupin. The career of two Studio Ghibli's founders, but Yasuo Otsuka was originally slated to direct, and he was like, no thank you, and kind of just passed it on to Hayao Miyazaki so he could do animation direction instead, which is the same thing that happened, if you remember, in Horus, where Yasuo Otsuka was selected to direct that film, but handed it off to Isao Takahata instead. So he just kept getting them jobs for some reason. I want to say that also happened with Heidi at some point, Heidi and or Anne of Green Gables.
Just the ultimate wingman.
Yeah, pretty much. And he was slated to do that. No, Yasuji Mori was originally slated to do Heidi. That's it. A lot of the Toei old guard kind of being like, oh, we don't need to be directors. We'll let the young guys do it. Because they never direct as much as you'd think they would. Compared to like the Mushi Pro guys that eventually go on to direct a lot of their own stuff. But they kind of cleared the way, and Castle of Cagliostro is just a really incredible like culmination of a lot of influences in a neat way. Again, you see a lot of the old Toei DNA, a little bit of like Animal Treasure Island. The big twist at the end is sort of cueing the Animal Treasure Island's climax. I don't know if this is like universally considered, but in Clarice, I always saw a little bit of the princess from Gulliver's Travels Beyond the Moon, which was like Hayao Miyazaki's like first story contribution to a thing, even when he was just an in-betweener. And that girl is probably like the prototype for Moe, that animated character that shows up for 5 seconds at the end of a Toei film from 1965. Weirdly significant character that shows up for 5 seconds.
Many such cases.
Yeah, exactly. And it all comes back to Bainyang and in Hakuja Den, really. 1958, Hayao Miyazaki weeping for the most beautiful pure maiden, and he's always chasing the high of the beautiful pure maiden.
Many such cases.
But beyond that, it's like also like internationally kind of oriented. Like there's a ton of the Thief and the Mockingbird, or the King and the Mockingbird rather, which is a tremendous French animated picture. 1959 released as The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep. in 1980 released as King of the Mockingbird, with a new animation. That like the gyrocopter and a lot of Count Cagliostro in this is inspired by the eponymous king in that one. And like A Wonderful World of Puss in Boots, there's a ton of that. Sort of quoting is the polite way. I feel like quoting animation is a lot nicer sounding than self-plagiarism, and I feel like it represents the fact that animation is hard. If you made a really good cut, it's okay. If you reuse it, I don't mind. Most people won't notice. But beyond like the influences, like all the stuff that's kind of informing this really incredible film, it's just such a tight, streamlined, adventure story that it's really recognizable why everybody kind of. I mean, well, I guess box office wise, it didn't do great, but the people who did see it, who got out to the theater to watch this one, really fell in love with it.
The Iron Giant story, a tale as old as time.
Right? Just go to the movies. It's fine. You can watch Galaxy Express 3.9 for the 5th time later. You can see the new Lupin picture instead. I think the Galaxy Express 3.9 film was well out of theaters by the time this came out. However, have we considered? No, I think this is just a really remarkable effort from Hayao Miyazaki. And just a really good first step forward. It's easy to see why, because this is also really important in him working with Toshio Suzuki, who was then just a reporter at Animage, the anime magazine, and then that obviously results in Nausicaa and Studio Ghibli and a million other things. Like even if this movie didn't do well, it's one of the most important animated features ever made. That's a pretty impressive feat for the second animated feature in a series of like character vehicles. I don't feel like people usually have super high expectations for one of those, but it's really cool when you get something as inventive and remarkably fun as this. But that's enough of me yammering on about how remarkable this movie is in not terribly specific ways. Let's take a quick break for advertisements, and then we'll be back to talk about animation and visual design on this one, because it's pretty remarkable. Welcome back. More ads. MoviePalette.com. Colors? Look at that one behind Tim. It's Mandy. And also, a movie palette based on the film Mandy.
That's true.
Just to the left of his poster for Mandy. It's a pretty nice little piece of wall art, fairly high quality. And if you're interested, there's a link below. It's moviepalette.com. If you'd like your own movie palette, you can get a discount using the code SQUAD15, which gives us a little bit of change on the side. And if the film you don't like isn't on there, then for a slightly higher fee, you can request a custom-made one. And again, that SQUAD15 code will help sort of bring it down to parity with a regular one. They're nice little pieces of art. So kind of tasteful, a bit more elegant. Not quite from the graphic tee school of design. Sufficiently minimalist that you can kind of beg off request if you like a particularly sort of crass film. Like, I don't know, if you have your Van Wilder movie palette, I guess suddenly that makes Van Wilder a little bit more classy. I've killed our reputation with the Van Wilder audience. This is the worst. But definitely check it out. I think they're really remarkable little pieces of art. But enough of that. Speaking of remarkable pieces of art, let's talk about the animation and visual design of Castle of Cagliostro. Tim.
Yeah, the animation and visual design of Castle Cagliostro is pretty good. It reminded me, I think, a lot of, like early part 2 and like his first show, Future Boy Conan. That show about a boy named Conan who was in the future. Love that one. I was actually when I was watching it earlier, right before this recording, my fiance had a friend over because they were getting ready to go to a concert, so they sat and watched the first like half hour with me, and her friend, who like had no familiarity with Lupin or anything, was just kind of like, am I imagining that this looks a lot like Ghibli? And so I was very excited to be like, this is Miyazaki's first movie. And they also made a remark whenever Lupin did the little like machine that like he hit the button and then they glided down. They were like, go gadget, and then I got to bring up Lupin the Eighth.
Yeah.
So that was fun. Yeah, animation is very pretty. It is definitely emblematic of Miyazaki's style going forward, and sort of his early style specifically. It's a pretty movie. Pretty movie. Back to you, Ethan.
Absolutely, yeah. This is a really exceptional sort of picture. The Miyazaki's penchant for gadgetry, especially, really fits in nicely with Lupin. So all the little gizmos, very like, particularly this vision of Lupin, because his gadgetry is always kind of on that intersection of being kind of elaborate, but also a little bit old-fashioned. Like the gyrocopter feels like an anachronism, but also sort of fantastical and alienated from what we think of as like James Bond gadgetry, sort of futuristic circa the 60s. It feels like even by the contemporary like looking at this work, this feels a bit old, like to an audience watching this in the 70s, which is nice. It's a really nice line, and I think it speaks to a sort of timeless quality. I'm so glad he was able to reuse a lot of the studies that he did for presumably Puss in Boots, because he did the manga for that too. He was weirdly involved in Puss in Boots. If you're a big Puss in Boots head, then you'll love Hayao Miyazaki's Puss in Boots manga and his works on the 1969 film.
I love Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
Yeah. I remember when Austin accidentally put in the Puss in Boots: The Last Wish when I said the second Puss in Boots movie.
That was specifically what I was referencing.
That's still incredible. I thought it was a bit the whole time. And no, it's Three Musketeers in Boots.
Remember when Perro had a realistic depiction of an anxiety attack?
I think that was in the Captain and the Game Master episode where Perro shows up for some reason and he looks disgusting. I hate you, Captain and the Game Master Perro, based on the NES Puss in Boots game that sucks shit. It's cheeks and bad. But speaking of things that aren't cheeks and bad, this film's visual design and animation. Emily, if you want to talk about that.
I mean, what's there not to love? Miyazaki's love of faux Euro rolling green hills and big blue skies make a surprisingly vast expanse for Lupin, who's so often sort of boxed into a city or a mansion or a bank or some sort of elaborate hole he's digging to get under a city or a mansion or a bank. It's so focused, on what Lupin is doing, even on his more globetrotting adventures, like in part 2, that it never really seems to stop and smell the roses, like this film explicitly makes its mission statement to do in the title sequence alone. Yasuo Otsuka's returning hand at character design gets kind of put through the Miyazaki filter a little bit, even more so than their time together in part 1, retaining the sort of core shapes that hit that unmistakable proto-Ghibli vibe, but still being recognizably Lupin. You've got, Clarice, who is very clearly from that Ghibli mold, who begot Makio Yamada from when he returned for that last episode of Part 2, who begat Nausicaa of the Valley of Studio Topcraft. All the attention and the detail, the character acting and the facial expressions, it's so frequent and easy to parse that there's just no wonder that all the dubs kind of just nail all the character voices, all the big moments. Like you said, there's no shortage of the funny gadgets and the gimmicks. The cars are modeled off cars that the animators or directors had. Lupin's little wrist winch, the classic cartoon bits like the painting with the eye holes, all the elaborate mechanisms in the clock towers, a lot of nice intricacy. It's an absolute visual feast, much like the giant cartoon plate of spaghetti from the anime food that looks so good.
My fiance's friend also brought up when they were eating the spaghetti, they thought that they were just like grabbing it by the hand, which is just the correct way to eat that delicious looking spaghetti.
Absolutely. I like I think that speaks to it too, is the way they eat food as much as anything. Like the vigor and the weight of movements, like layers of action occurring there in terms of like smaller movements on the hands leading to bigger movements in the pasta, and the way it has like a trailing kind of secondary action on some of the noodles as they're being caught up in it. Even that is just like such a microcosm of what's so remarkable about the animation in this film. It's a really good indicator. I think Horus on some level is part of this, but I think it's such a strong indicator of the future Ghibli style, especially because it's this wonderful intersection of like limited animation styling and like full like Disney animation. I that really defines their work. I know Studio Ghibli generally resists anime as a classification. They like to market their films as manga eiga in Japan, which is manga film, in like a full animation tradition, to kind of differentiate it, make it more of like an aesthetically aspirational kind of object and separate it from the larger crowd of anime. I don't love that distinction too much. I feel like they could embrace being sort of the happy medium between these two things, but I recognize wanting to do that, especially when you're coming out of Toei, and also maybe on some level distancing themselves from the workplace practices of anime as much as anything. But no, there's so many remarkable little cuts of anime, or like not even little, big cuts of animation. Like the centerpiece is Kazuhide Tomonaga's really exceptional car chase sequence, which was heavily corrected by Miyazaki and Otsuka. This film was made over the course of 7 months, which is an incredibly short time for such a remarkable film. I think it started production 3 days after Mystery of Momo premiered.
I've taken longer to make movies.
Yeah, right? Like short films and that sort of thing. I mean, having a robust infrastructure definitely helps. Like if you have a bunch of guys who've been drawing Lupin every week and then they just got done drawing Lupin for a movie, that makes things a little bit easier. However, there's a lot in this movie. And Tomonaga's car chase sequence made up almost a third of production time. It took him 2 months to make that, which is simultaneously like... that's kind of a lengthy amount of time, and then I think about it for like a minute longer, and it's like, that car chase sequence is really long, actually. That seems like a really short time, considering like how much is going on there. I mean, I'm sure it helped that he had really good storyboards from Miyazaki, and like image boards and that sort of thing to work from and everything, but that's such an incredible sequence of animation. I also really have to shout out Nobuo Tomizawa, who did some really great work. Tomizawa's best known as, or did other work, but it was like an assistant director, I believe, or animation director on Fuma Conspiracy. But Tomizawa also did the sequence of the assassins when they're attacking Lupin at night, which is a great scene. I love the assassins, the shadows, I believe is what they're called, and all their designs. I like their aquatic variant. They're both really distinct versions, like outfits with like unique purpose, and they all look really cool. We missed out on one too. There was supposed to be a sequence after they fly away from the castle where they're chased into the forest and they have to battle a brown variant that kind of looks like the later robots that show up in the Lupin III Part 2 finale, and later are reused in Castle in the Sky. I really like their design with like gas masks. They're really cool looking guys. I really wish we'd gotten a version of it, but I also recognize that this movie is so tightly paced that adding an extra like 5-minute sequence might undercut that a little bit, but I wouldn't mind. I maybe a hot take, maybe not a hot take actually, but I wouldn't mind more Castle of Cagliostro. That'd be pretty cool actually.
There's a PS1 game.
Hold on. I meant more of the film. I'm good on Lupin going to Mist Island. Thank you. Lupin, the sequel to Mist.
Lupin III Exile.
Yeah. Goddamn. There's so many Mist sequels. There's like way more Mist sequels than you'd ever think there were.
Much like Lupin TV specials.
Correct. Too many. Also, another thing about Yasuo Otsuka that's funny to me, interesting, is apparently he hated Star of the Giants. He really didn't like Star of the Giants, and I think that shows in their like resistance of the anime label. And just in terms of like character posing in this one, everyone's pretty lithe and like they don't use a ton of lines. It feels like they're working in kind of a the obsession with detail kind of phase, which I've always appreciated. They kind of toe that line in distributing levels of detail and that sort of thing.
Loosey-goosey.
Yeah, and everyone's pretty loose in this too, which is nice. I feel like, in a way, the resistance to Star of the Giants is interesting because I also think Lupin III Part 1 is way more Gekiga and kind of resembles, maybe not Star of the Giants, but I don't know, the Tomorrow's Joe or something a little bit more closely than you'd think for a Lupin thing. Everyone's got real thick lines and hairy hands, and some of that's retained in this. But I think there's just a lot of good, really good stuff. I also really like, not as an insult, to be clear, it's interesting where they are able to find ways to kind of cut costs in the animation. I love, like, 3 times we see it, the exact same shot of the lasers, as they're kind of moving in the same direction in front of different environments, just that same, like, straight-on shot. It's always very funny to me for some reason. And also the few shots where you can very clearly see that Otsuka hasn't done, he's the animation director, so his job was corrections, basically, which is ultimately a lot of redrawing Lupin's face to make it consistent throughout. And you could definitely tell there are a few shots where he was not able to, because he always looks a little bit more, like, manly, a bit more like Part 3E, in a way that I always find interesting, like early Part 3E. So it's an interesting thing where I think this movie's really impressive, and I think the rushed production leaves just enough seams that are kind of like pleasant and interesting to poke at, but not distracting or bad in any way, just like texture on this already really remarkable piece. But I've talked about that for way too long. Let's move on along to talk about this film's dubs, both of which are really incredible. We're not talking about any foreign language dubs outside of English because we don't believe that other languages are real, to be clear. Emily, thanks. Start us off.
Sure. So the majority of my familiarity is with the anime stuff. That's what I first watched it with. That's what I watched it basically almost every other time of my life with, until I was like, all right, I gotta start getting with some of these alternate Lupin dubs under my belt. So I've only seen the streamlined dub, I think twice now. The other being the other day, just for this pod. But I mean, they're both really good. They're both quite different. Streamline is a bit more of it's honestly a bit of an adaptation of that 1980 theatrical subtitling script than it is a fresh translation of anything. And then the anime dub it's a bit more skewed towards a fresh translation. It's got some clever bits of rewriting and adaptation work done to it. But then it's also got kind of that reputation for having a lot of swear words, which yeah, it kind of does. It's kind of a potty mouth. There's a reason there's a family-friendly track on the Blu-ray and the 4K. I think there's a lot of interesting casting choices. As far as animes goes, David Hayter as Lupin. That's an interesting one. You don't think of David Hayter as someone who would voice, a kind of happy-go-lucky, carefree guy like Lupin. He's a bit more serious roles, or like Snake, or maybe the Bernie from War in the Pocket, that kind of thing. I mean, he was no stranger to anime. Fun fact, one of the pseudonyms he would often go under is Sean Barker, which is the name of the character he played in The Guyver 2 Dark Hero. But I like his Lupin a lot. He's pretty breezy, pretty confident. He's lacking that kind of musical quality that Lupin voice actors tend to get. I guess sort of patterned after Yasuo Yamada or maybe Kanichi Kurita later. But I think otherwise he's really confident, really strong. He's got this great aloofness to him that works pretty well. I'd like to hear him in a different time for a different Lupin sometime, and him coming back to the role would be pretty fun. Bob Bergen too. His Lupin is a lot more naturalistic. You can tell he became a real voice actor, to borrow something Ethan said to me the other day. Because he famously is Porky Pig. He's got a great David Hayter and Bob Bergen both have great little interviews on the Blu-ray where they talk about how they got into the gig and how they became Lupin and that kind of thing. But Bob Bergen's Lupin, it's so easy. He slips into that role like a glove. He's got this instant charisma to him. He describes Lupin in that interview as a great bullshit artist who thinks he's a lot better than he actually is. And it's like, damn, you nailed it. Right on the head. You did it, man. You got exactly what makes the character good. I guess other highlights are, Zenigata. We've got Kevin Seymour for the anime's dub, who was one of the directors on that dub. Goes under a lot of pseudonyms. Very funny. He plays Zenigata as a bit more of a goofball. Really hams up a lot of his lines. He's got that easily flustered kind of quality, a lot more cartoony compared to Streamline's David Povall, who plays more of a straight-laced career man type, kind of embodying that what's the lines? Think about the archetypal Japanese worker child of the Showa era a bit. It took me a little bit to adjust to David Povall, but once I understood it, I was like, oh, okay, actually he's really close to Goro Naya's portrayal, actually. They're pretty good. Let's see. Who else is... I really like Bridget Hoffman as Clarice in the anime's dub. She's pretty close to Sumi Shimamoto. She's got a lot of great noises of distress, especially when she's beating Lupin for trying to save her when she wakes up from fainting from the car chase. She's got this really nice, naive innocence to her. Really captures the role pretty well. She always sounds like she's just a second away from absolutely just crying her eyes out. It's good. It's fun. There's some other bits, both the Jigans, like you mentioned, are strange. Not exactly what you'd think of as Jigan, but still work pretty well. Goemons are also kind of, they're whatever. I could take or leave them. Fujiko as well. I mean, she kind of has a reduced role in this, so it's hard to gauge her too much. They don't have a lot to work with, but they're both fun in their own way. The big one is the Count. The Count absolutely is great in either language. You got Michael McConaughey for Streamline and Kirk Thornton in animes. The fun thing about that is that Kirk Thornton actually also is in the Streamline dub, but he's as the captain of the Royal Guards, so he gets to be in both. That's fun. That's cool. They both have a lot of fun playing this character who's perpetually talking out of the side of his mouth. It's fun to see which scenes they specifically go for that more than the other. I'll always think of Kirk Thornton's Count. There's the bit where Jodo's on the turret and they're about to fire, and Jodo's like, shall I shoot, sir? And then Kirk Thornton goes, not until we have the ring. And that's just so good. It's such a good choice. Streamline dub also has guy of all time Mike Reynolds as the gardener, and especially gruff Mike Reynolds at that. Very fun. I like that they have the dubs decide to name the gardener different in both of them. He doesn't have a name in the Japanese. Streamline names him Walter. Anime names him Christopher. I don't know why they bothered doing that, but that's fun. I like that. I think Streamline also names the Zenigata's number one captain guy. I think they call him Sam and that. So that's fun too. That's a lot, but this is kind of my wheelhouse. I have a lot to say about Lupin dubs. What can I say? But back to you.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind for when we have you on for Mystery of Mama with its 4 English language dubs.
Oh boy. Hey, some of them that's the same cast. Yeah, Streamline, you get the David Povall and Bob Bergen and all them. Same for the Tales of the Wolf from the 2 episodes of Part 2 that Miyazaki directed. So they have a bit of a tenure. It's fun to see that they actually get more than one shake at it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I do like Bob Bergen does, as I recall, a strikingly good job at handling a very different Lupin in Mamo. I really was struck by how good he is at that. By when we were going through the Tales of the Wolf episodes, and the way he plays fake Lupin in
that's really fun.
The last episode is very fun. He takes to that immediately. Actually, fans of the show may remember when we discussed Bob Bergen in Megazone 2-3, Part 1, all way back in the day.
Death Machine Star remembers.
That's right. Which I think is also a really good performance. If anybody can make Shogo Yagi likable, it's Bob Bergen. But I think that's a lot of good comparisons in terms of like cast here. I feel like it's nice in that everyone puts in a strong enough performance that like you could legitimately argue faves one or the other. I know it's a bit more contentious in terms of adaptational decisions, but I'll talk about some of those when it's my turn. Tim.
So, I will say, like, the first time I watched this movie was the Japanese version. This was at a time when I was more averse to dubs, you know, the whole dub bad thing that people say, which I mostly don't agree with. I like some dubs. And then eventually, so I own the Disney collected works of Hayao Miyazaki Blu-ray, which is the only Disney release of a Lupin III thing, which is just very funny to me. And the dub they had on that Blu-ray was the streamlined dub, oddly enough. So I had watched that a while ago. And then in preparation for this recording, I decided to rent it on iTunes to see the anime's dub. And as it turns out, the version on iTunes is also the streamlined dub. So I have not seen the anime's dub, but I have seen the streamlined dub twice. It's charming, considering it's one of those older dubs, and knowing the weird legal issues that forced them to name Lupin Wolf in that version. It's just very odd every time I hear them talking about Wolf.
I can't bear the thought of never seeing you again. I love you. I can't help it. Oh, Wolf.
It's a fun enough dub, but when I'm hearing Lupin, it just kind of sounds wrong to me if it's not Yasuo Yamada or Tony Oliver or occasionally Sonny Strait.
Sonny Strait's a good Lupin.
He does a decent Lupin. He's got some fun ones, but. Yeah. I mean, I thought the streamline dub was okay. It's certainly not one of their worst dubs. Vampire Hunter D, that dub is one that is very stinky, but also very funny. This one was just, it's fine. That's my take on that. But I do want to eventually watch the anime's dub. You're giving it glowing reviews, and I need to see the version with all the extra swears. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, that anime's dub is quite strong. I think it is very funny too, because every once in a while you can hear when he has to whisper a little bit or be a bit more stoic. David Hayter, he slips into Snake just a little bit, and that's always amusing when you get just a little bit of that. In his performance, but I'm quite fond of that streamlined dub. It is interesting. I think Emily mentioned this earlier that it feels like it's based on a bit more that early Frontier translation Frontier Enterprises. That's it, right? Translation. The dub for Mamo in 19 that came out for that, and that's an interesting dub. Not very good, but interesting. Because it's weird that the subtitles rename all the characters, their localized names in that too, which is sort of fascinating, except that some of them are kind of arbitrarily changed. I mean, well, for the better, honestly, because I think they called Fujiko Margot in the Mamo dub, which is a terrible name for Fujiko. Just a really weird one. I think she's Rosalie in the new dub.
I think it's Rosary.
Lupin III, the woman called Margot Robbie.
Good lord. What is it? Rosary,
I think.
Oh, okay.
Like IE, not Y, to be clear, but
weird.
Because I remember distinctly thinking, like, why isn't it Rosalie? That would be a better name.
Fluid consonant, I guess. I don't know. I would imagine this was somebody like a Toho person in Hong Kong doing this, not like a Japanese person, but who knows.
There's also
And
the
I think-
mystery of Detective Ed Cott in the Cagliostro subtitles versus Ed Scott in that Mamo dub.
That's so interesting. When they just kind of arbitrarily changed it. But otherwise, it's Goemon is samurai, and
That's true.
I think that is true. That's correct. And Jigen is rechristened Dan Dunn, as I recall, which is a great name. But they obviously give them, but for the most part, their regular names. I do like that the streamlined dub does sneak in a Lupin from Johto when he's first introducing him, and then I think I think they say the Wolf, so to kind of key you in on, it's a code name for this person. I think they're good at doing that. They don't have to worry about that in Mamo, thankfully. Whereas I recall they just call him Lupin. I think they do call him the Wolf, kind of colloquially a couple times, but for the most part it's Lupin in that. I'm really warm on the streamlined dub, obviously. I think the performance is good. I don't really mind some of the changes. For instance, in the anime's dub in the original Japanese, Clarice doesn't remember her encounter with Lupin. And in the streamlined dub, she's like, "Oh, I remember you. I love you so much." And when she's like wrapped her arms around him and burying her face in his chest, which I've always liked as an adaptational choice. Also, they imply that I like during the montage of like all the years of ill doings by the Cagliostro family, like that they're much more significant world politics than is originally implied. I've always thought that was funny. I also like that Napoleon gets to show up in this film after making a brief appearance in Mystery of Mamo as well. Completely different designs. Somebody should have been fired for that blunder. But I think Steve Boulen's Jigen always stands out to me because it's a little bit too nasally, which is an interesting choice. I know a lot of people don't like that he calls Lupin boss, but I've always liked that. I don't know. It's particularly in this film where he definitely plays second fiddle to Lupin, maybe less so in Mamo. The side characters get not short shrift. I think they all have fun moments in this too. But the film very clearly is like, this is a Lupin adventure, so we're focusing on Lupin, and the ensemble is here to kind of support that, but not kind of get in the way. Lots of good stuff with Zenigata. The iconic line, "should have worn an asbestos suit," which is a good decision. I think it's funny, and I think that everyone who says otherwise is wrong and bad. I'm going after you, Usenet forum users from the 90s. Going after you, millions of nerds, everyone who doesn't like Carl Masick. By billions, I mean probably dozens.
From the director of Hundreds of Beavers comes billions of nerds.
I think it's mostly a pretty strong adaptational script, though if you're looking for a streamlined dub that's a bit more straightforward representation of the material, Mamo does that quite well, as I recall. It's a lot more close to the original material because, again, they don't kind of have to deal with making a translation based on those crummy subtitles. For the most part, I think they were given scripts for Mamo, thankfully, which results in a product that's a lot more accurate to the original. Though it still makes some kind of judicious changes. I want to say most of the dubs keep in the Mamo dub keep a kind of weirdly translated bit from Zenigata talking about staking Lupin, and I want to say it's the streamlined dub that turns it into a stupid joke about steak dinner, which I always like for some reason. I have bad taste, that's it. But I'm really fond of those performances. Michael McConaughey, I do like Michael McConaughey and Kirk Thornton as Cagliostro because they are so similar. Like the performances are really close, actually. With like just enough variation that you could pick one that you like. I think Michael McConaughey knocks it out of the park, but that's just because I love Michael McConaughey, especially in streamlined dubs where they cast him as assholes, as schemers, because he's really good at playing that role.
I did want to shove in one quick bit to mention, since we've just talked about Kirk Thornton. Did you know he actually gets to reprise the role of Count Cagliostro in the obscure OVA Here is Greenwood, which has a scene where a bunch of college kids reenact Castle of Cagliostro. It also has 2 dubs, and Kirk Thornton is also in the redub.
That's really good. What a weird bit of parody, but I like that. It's good. All right, let's move on to final thoughts. Tim.
Movie good. No, this is a solid picture, solid start for a person who would become one of the most beloved directors of anime films. And it's just a fun time, you know. Whether or not you have any experience with Lupin, it's definitely worth checking out. And yeah, if you can see it on a big screen, I would definitely recommend it. Hopefully you get a good crowd for it, because it's a fun time with a nice crowd. And just a solid picture. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with all these Ghibli films, see it on a big screen, especially Cagliostro, because you get to see it a little bit less than the other ones. Even like the Takahata stuff or the Goro stuff. I don't know the last time they showed Tales from Earthsea in a theater, and I don't know. I kind of want to see that, or up on Poppy Hill at least. One of those, the good one, quote unquote, such as it were. But Cagliostro is one you have fewer chances to see, at least as of now. So I'd recommend checking it out if you ever get the opportunity in theaters. Emily, final thoughts.
Cagliostro became a big favorite of mine. It's one I often return to. It's one of my throw it on if I want to feel good kind of movies. I like to use it to reminisce. It's nostalgic for me in a lot of ways. I've shown it to a lot of people over the years, so I always think about a lot of good memories. Its place in the greater Lupin franchise is fascinating. It's half this all-time classic that every subsequent film just can't seem to escape the shadow of, and then also it's like the weird family-friendly romp that lacks the nihilistic bite of the core product in favor of Miyazaki's more typical optimistic tendencies. But despite that, it's something I can never get enough of. I've also found myself torn between those perspectives. Sometimes I'll watch this film and I'll go, I don't know, but then sometimes I'll watch this film and go, no, yeah, this is one of the greatest of all time, absolutely. There's this great bit in this Lupin OVA called Green versus Red, where there's a scene of this guy who may or may not be Lupin. It's a long story, but he's asleep in a projection booth, and he fell asleep watching Castle of Cagliostro, and in his hand is an iPod playing Fire Treasure with the album art and everything. And Jigen wakes him up and he goes, "Are you watching that thing again?" And like, yeah, they got me. They got my ass. They got my ass right good. I'll never recover from this. Good bit. Great movie. Glad to watch it again. Glad to be here. Glad to get to talk about it with you guys. Back to you, Ethan.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is just a very easy to watch film. I watched it a few times for this. I did a presentation sort of on this a few years back where I watched it way more times. And it never, I was never like tired. I was like, oh no, I have to watch Cagliostro again. It was like, time to watch Cagliostro again. Every day I wake up, open palm, slam it into my VCR, and do all the moves along with Lupin. Do all the moves along with Clarice. So it's a lot of flailing. I make Brigitte Hoffman's noises along with her.
I drink the whole lake in one gulp.
God, one gulp. 37 in a row. Cagliostro. But no, I think it's really just a tremendous picture. I feel like that's an incredibly uncontroversial statement. Even if it wasn't terribly well received, it actually lost money when it first came out, if you could believe that. But pretty quickly made it all up on like character goods and that sort of thing later. It's obvious why it's such an important sort of moment in animation. You can argue a lot of things before and after, like Nausicaa or Gables or Conan or Heidi. It may be more significant and like larger schemes sort of influencing like Studio Ghibli and the animation styles and that sort of thing. But Cagliostro, I think, is a linchpin. If you don't have Cagliostro, a lot of things don't quite fall into place, and it's really remarkable that Miyazaki was able to do this so well for his first feature, despite having a lot of experience in the space of television works and that sort of thing. I mean, television is a very different thing from a movie, and
that's true.
TV and movie, different, actually. But they are really different mediums, and being able to so easily transition over to the feature animation space is really remarkable, even for someone who'd, been in the industry for as long as Miyazaki had, nearly 2 decades at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's really exceptional, and it was a delight talking about it with you guys. Miyazaki was on fire and continued to be on fire, and if he wanted to not be on fire, he should have worn an asbestos suit. And you know who else should wear an asbestos suit?
Who?
You!
Oh.
The person watching/listening to this episode of Bomb Squad Matinee. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, leave a comment underneath to boost us in the algorithm, etc. There will be a version of this on Spotify eventually, well, as long as other podcast platforms. If you use any of those, rate us 5 stars, leave comments, etc. Those all help us in the algorithm over there. And I'd like to give an extra special thanks to our $10 patrons, Jason Secord and Tanya, Tanner's mom, Kraft. Tremendous work. Salute. Nothing but respect for the woman who's braver than the troops. If you'd like to be thanked at the end of these videos, as well as access to a growing number of commentary tracks, or just want to give us a bit of cash, be sure to check out our Patreon and throw us a little bit of money. We always very much appreciate it. And be sure to tune in next time for whatever we're talking about. We don't do tune in next time bits anymore. However, we'll be talking about something cool, I'm sure. SpongeBob is coming up, or has been out. You all love SpongeBob, you little freaks. Watch SpongeBob. Watch Tanner get excited about SpongeBob. You know you love SpongeBob. Check it out. We're going to talk about Godzilla soon. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lupin. He's a nice man. End of video. End of recording.
Doodles.
Slid my ticket across the table and I said, "Sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl."